How's it going, Alex?
Well, not much.
Did you get you texted me earlier that you were going to get your deposit. Did you get your deposit already? Or are you about to receive it, or what?
Gonna receive it tomorrow.
Tomorrow, you've been working a bunch of hours.
Mm, not really, cause I
Uh,
get paid like every 2 weeks.
right, bi-weekly.
First week, only work at the weekends.
Do you work full time or part time?
Part time.
Part time.
We're like 6 or 5 hours. The next day, the same thing, and then last weekend, I didn't fucking get that much money. I only work like 2 or 3 hours because there was like no business.
Uh, does
It was slow.
so to get a little bit of clarification, so you work at IHOP and your dad works at the same
Yeah,
IHOP, or how does that?
the same
Uh,
because my dad told me to no, not told me. Told the manager if it's okay to bring my kid to work here. And he was like, "Oh yeah, sure."
yeah, and they probably Yeah, because you probably fit the minimum. Did they mention how much they're going to be paying you, or
Minimum wage.
okay? Uh, do you know about how much your dad's making?
Probably like 20 or he's a cook, so I don't fucking know.
Well, yeah, it's tough to say because cooks make all kinds of pay depending on where they're at. Oh man, I know in my own personal experience, I think I started off because back in 2014, I worked at a movie theater, but it wasn't a typical movie theater. We also had like a kitchen and a bar, and I would say
My
probably
dad also works at.
say that again.
Oh, my dad also works at a bar too.
Is
He
he a
got two
bartender?
dogs. Huh?
Is he a bartender?
A bartender? Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, because
Which
I would say
I
yeah.
don't know what bar he works at, but whatever.
Uh, yeah, because I probably in 2015 was when I would say transitioned into doing more of the cooking, especially in 2016. Uh, because I think 2015 they were kind of training me mostly on doing like the front house operations, and then they did more the back of house stuff later on. Because I remember they started me off at minimum wage, and I did that forever, doing all kinds of stuff like doing the box office then doing checking the tickets. I forgot the name of it. It's like essentially a ticket checker. I think they had a special name or term for it. I can't remember off the top of my head. But you just sat on like a bar stool ripping tickets the whole 8 hour shift. Now that gets a boring, kind of annoying here and there. Um, that I think I personally would prefer box office more. But anyway, get more to like the cooking stuff. I think they started me off at like $8 an hour, and then they bumped me up to $10 an hour. But they started me off doing dishes, and then I did kind of like a little bit of everything. They slowly would train me on one area, then another area, and I think what ended up happening was I was making $10 an hour. Then they sold the
Mm-hmm.
company, and another company bought out that movie theater, and then they dropped my pay to $8.25 in this weird process where they were like looking at my pay throughout the whole. Um, since they let's see, they bought the theater in 2016, so in those like 2 3 years, uh, they averaged my pay and got to 825, and then they just stuck me at 825, and I was doing everything to get back up to 10. I was saying, hey, I finished the serve safe courses, so I have training with food handling. I have experience. I've been here several years, and I have a high school degree, and I think at that point I still didn't have my associate's degree, but I was in the process of getting it. So I made the argument that hey, I already have some college credit as well, college education, even though it's not complete. With everything rounded up together, I think there's room for me to grow, and they didn't really particularly on the corporate level they didn't do a thing. Um, but in terms of the management at the theater, they ended up playing favorites. Basically, whoever they had their favorite, or your friends, or whoever who already was in management, they're not going to go anywhere until whoever is higher up management leaves. Um, then they're going to go and kind of move up, and then they pick their favorites to go into management. Those who they don't really care about, or who they're their friends and all that, basically get stuck in that position. And that's why I know guys who've been at the movie theater for over 10, 15, 20 years, and they're stuck in the same position, and hardly any mobility or any raises or pay or anything. Occasionally, the only benefit they might possibly get on a rare occasion is some time off, but it's not even paid time off. It's like, all right, you can have a break, and that's like the most they would offer, possibly for the seniors or veterans or whatever you want to call them. Um, so even like recently, when I tried to apply for that same movie theater again they played the favorites game. It's like, but now it's even more severe. They won't even let you get into the theater unless they have a reason to want you to work there. If you're a nobody, they're not going to hire you unless they can somehow take advantage of you, or unless it's like something that will basically benefit them in some form. So I understand that, and then even when I left the movie theater to go to the second movie theater, I worked as a bartender there for a little bit, and I think the most they did was they bumped me up to like 850. And I wasn't happy at 850, but I figured at least I'm officially in a bartender, so I might be making more tips. Um, I don't know. Do you make tips as a host at all, or is it kind of just on the servers,
Uh,
or is it kind of like a
it's on
share?
the server.
All right, just the servers. Okay. Do you have any idea as to what they're making in tips, or is it always random, or is there an average?
Mm, maybe average and shit, but I've never, you know. Soon might be a server.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you
You
my
know.
averages because when I first started, because as a regular employee, well, the movie theater is a little sketchy because they have like 4 or 5 different positions in the front of house. They have, your ticket seller. They don't make any tips. The guy who checks tickets doesn't make any tips. The person who cleans theaters doesn't make any tips, but the movie theater felt bad for and they call them ushers, the guys who clean the theater. So they, got to sweep up the popcorn on the floor and all that. They bumped their pay up to like 8.75 or something like that, maybe $9 at the end before I quit. Um, but when I was making tips as like selling as a bartender and selling popcorn and all that, if you're just selling popcorn and soda, you're hardly ever going to get any tips. If you're a bartender, you get more tips.
Mm-hmm.
Usually people feel that tipping $1 or $2 per drink is something that's common, but when you have a several hundred people coming into the theater, everybody's fighting over the tips and all that, and it becomes this whole chaotic mess. And so when I first started off making tips, I was maybe making like $10 a day, $15, occasionally 20. And then it moved up to like 30, $40 a day, and that was like a normal thing. And right before I left, I think my record was like on a Monday morning working at the bar. Yeah, so like my record was $158 on a Monday morning working as a bartender at that first movie theater. This was like 2016. And eventually you start finding out ways to kind of like, um, what's the term? I don't know the correct term, but kind of like getting back at the movie theater for them kind of taking advantage of you. Um, So there's a bunch of different ways, like what's a good example? Like finding ways to leave early, how to do your job a lot quicker instead of it taking forever. And you kind of learn over time, what ways to kind of like cut corners and make your job easier.
Hmm.
Um, but at the second movie theater, I wasn't maybe other than my pay was bumped up to 8.50 an hour. They had the same thing. They had their own favorites, and the guys who knew how to make tips were not going to let you basically cut into them making their money or their tips, right? So it's always kind of like a battle between who's going to get the tips and all that. Um, so I'm assuming that's can be an issue with a lot of places. That's why I started realizing, well, let me try to get out of doing like the tips and all that, and find other ways to be making more money. And then eventually I started working at, um, so I had like two things in mind. My first thing was like, all right, I have to be a manager in order to be making more money. So that's why I went and finished my 2 year degree and started getting working towards my 4 year degree, or associates versus bachelor's degree, right? Because they like to give their fancy terms and all that. Um, so went to the movie theater. I mean, to the airport, and I worked in like a sales position, doing like mostly it was like currency exchange, but we also did like travel stuff. And I think I started off at like I think $11 an hour, and then before I left there, I was making like 15 bucks an hour. But I was making a bunch of tips. Like we had days where I think my record in tips from like one transaction or sale was like $300, and I think that's my record so far. Other than doing like back when I was doing the car detailing and all that. Um, but yeah, because we had days where you basically I was training myself to be kind of a lot better in sales, and talking people to do more exchanges and all that, and then you start getting these crazy transaction where people are exchanging like $8,000 into like euros or pounds or whatever other currency, and you get bonuses here and there for what you do, and from there I after the airport I went to working fast food, and that was my officially like my start in actual management work. But fast food where I worked at, we had a bad general manager who was greedy, and I think I was making only like $9 an hour. Um, and eventually they fired that manager. But this was after I quit working fast food. Um, but nowadays I have a friend who does that same job, and he's being paid 16 an hour, but he works like 40 hours a week, and he's always exhausted. He feels like he never has time to do anything. Plus, on top of working as a manager at that fast food, he also works at that same movie theater where my first job was, and he's only making $12 an hour doing that, even though he's worked there for probably over 20 years now, if maybe close to that. I don't know what the exact number is off the top of my head, but at least 10 years. 10, 15 years, probably close to 20. But anyway, um, what I end up getting into is teaching myself entrepreneurship. And it's a very difficult area to get into, but it has a lot of potential if you do it correctly. Um, when I was doing the car detailing stuff, I had to learn how to market myself, and then figure out, okay, how do I set up that business? And eventually, what I did was I taught myself how to do that, the car detailing. Um, and over time, getting clients, I started building a client list. Every time, somebody wanted their car cleaned, I put in their information into like an Excel spreadsheet. And, I had their name, what kind of car they had, their phone number, their address. And I started basically collecting a set of like data or information. And my plan was like, okay, I'm gonna clean their car, and then maybe in like a month or two, I'm gonna give them another call and be like, hey, what's up? How's everything going? Um, and I only had I had one. My first clients are the only people who are, where they like the work so much that they became friends with me on Facebook. And then I started getting my big money right when I started doing work with a logistics company, like cleaning semi trucks. And we had a deal where it was like with the semi trucks, I think it was $150 for each interior of a semi truck, and this was like 20, yeah, like right before COVID started, and a little bit during COVID, but this was like before we had like inflation and everything went up in price. Um, yeah, we were doing $150 per semi truck, and we had days where we almost hit like $1,000 because of how much work we were doing, and I had myself and two other people helping me to clean the trucks. And I think because it wasn't like consistent work, but it was at least a situation where I could probably make maybe $300 a week, depending on how their business was going. We had days where we made $600 in a day. Um, but the whole thing kind of went south when, like around summer of 2022, when I had to go to Russia, and I came back and I found out that logistics company closed their office in Charlotte and moved to Florida. So I basically stopped the business then. Um, but now what's interesting is I'm getting text messages from random people asking me to clean their car now, even though I haven't done any work like that in over a year. So now I'm thinking about getting back into doing that business, but I have to kind of like raise my prices a little bit compared to what it were before, um, because of this COVID, like the whole inflation. Um, but I have to kind of like also find a competing price based on what's in the area. And in my case, 150 seems to be the average for kind of like a whole detailing. Um, but my second thing that I'm doing now is I have to figure out a system where I can have somebody do the work if I'm not physically able to do the work, because I'm still having a little bit of health issues here and there, and plus I have to take care of my grandparents, so I can't be there all the time unless it's like, especially since it's summer, since it's hot in the middle of the day. uh, I have to try to come up with a solution to do the work, but like finish the job before it gets dark. Unless my other option, which I didn't have before, I have a friend who's a mechanic and he has a garage, and he's got a bunch of people who work with him there at that garage or shop. Um, and at least one of them has offered to help me do detailing. So what I'm thinking now is I have to talk to the guy, and the guy's my neighbor, so I can have an easy way to try to set something up. Um, but I want to, be fair with him and try to come up with a business plan of how we can get this to work. Because lately, when I've been talking to him, he's saying that, oh, I'm busy all the time. I've got so many cars I have to work on. Plus, he also buys and resells cars on like auction and all that. So there's a lot of different things in mind that he has to do. So that's kind of like where I'm at, sort of with that. Um, and plus, I got a few other things I do on top of that to have money coming in. So to kind of give you an idea of my path of what I've been doing ever since high school. Do you yourself think you're going to be staying with IHOP, or do you want to kind of like do different things, or?
I mean, I'm not gonna stay out for like forever, guy.
Do you think you're going to become later like a server and then maybe try doing like a cooking position?
No,
Or do you think I'm going to, try it out, maybe move on, or do you have a particular plan in mind, or?
I don't know. I got like, I'm trying to be a junior this year.
Yeah, so you're still gonna be busy with high school. So
Yeah.
part-time work is still, I would say, for high schoolers is probably good. Um, Plus, I don't even know if they can put you as full time. Some states have little like weird laws. I don't know what it's like in Arizona, but um, when I was doing the movie theater jobs and
They, dog,
huh,
they're not gonna fucking put me in full time because it's not gonna be like fucking busy.
uh, yeah, and plus it's IHOP.
I
I don't know
have
how busy it even gets.
in the morning. That's when it gets busy, but it's like afternoon later, like 5. It's like dead. There's only 2 servers and 1 cook. That's it.
Oh wow, yeah, that's like a graveyard shift sort of. Yeah, that's the term they call it. It's like the bare minimum to have operations go. And that's I've started to notice a lot of places like restaurants particularly are trying to go for that. Like they want this small in place with like one chef and then maybe like one cashier. Um
And it
like
opens 24 hours. You think I'm gonna work there like 24 hours? Fuck no.
yeah, true to that. But I got a friend, I got to talk to him how he has his thing set up. He found a job working at a Chinese restaurant, like takeout. Um he's a cashier. There's like one chef, and then I think there's one delivery driver. And
Mm-hmm.
the way they have their business set up, I don't know what the delivery driver makes, other than I know he makes tips. Um, and I don't know what the cook makes. But my friend, who's the cashier, he claims that he makes like 4,000 a month.
Damn.
And I'm like, how in the world do you do 4,000 a month? And doing the math on that, that's like over $24 an hour. If it's that, because he says it's like, I don't know. I gotta check his details out because part of me thinks that he may be kind of stretching the numbers a little bit, but still, that just sounds crazy to be making that much a month. But I've heard of people like I know one girl when I was at the airport. She would drive from Charlotte to Raleigh, which is like at least a 3.5 hour drive, close to 4, depending on how traffic is. Um, and she would work like at some bar for the weekend, and she would easily make like 2-3 thousand a weekend. And I'm just thinking, man, that's just so crazy. Because I feel like for 2-3 thousand, I mean, I would be doing that, but that's so tiring to be making such a drive as well. For that amount of money, I might even pay somebody to take me to work.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's just crazy thinking about how all that works. But I've
Also,
started reading more in this like entrepreneurship, and some of it's actually pretty useful. Like they don't teach it in school. Um, I'm talking about like in college, university, because I know in high school they definitely don't teach it.
what?
Entrepreneurship, how to start your own business. How do you get customers, clients? How do you talk to people? Public speaking. Um, how do you offer services and do custom what else? Customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that you can learn just from experience at working different places, but starting your own business, like, no one's going to teach you that unless it's like online and then you actually go out and do the work, which is what I did with the car detailing because I didn't do the only thing I ever did with door to door sales was like when I was doing the solar panel stuff about almost 2 years ago now, 1 or 2 years. And doing door to door sales is very tricky. You have to train yourself and then learn how to accept rejection from customers and see how to, how do you process that? Do you be like, all right, okay, have a good day, and you walk away, or do you try to, find an answer to everything they say? Like right now, I'm kind of studying more on that. Like, oh, thank you, I'm not interested. Most people be like, all right, cool, have a good day, and they, walk away. While now you can be like, is it more of an issue with the price or the value? And if it's a price issue, you usually go, you give them like a 10-15% discount, or but you don't be like, hey, I'm going to give you this discount if today's going to be that. You have to formulate it and say it in like a fancy way to make them interested and hook them in. Or if it's a value thing, you have to give them something that sounds unique. And usually you give them like 2-3 tries, and then sometimes a fourth try, and then usually you move on, because if you keep being desperate, they're going to get pissed off too. So you eventually learn that whole psychology of a consumer. I took what do they call it, consumer behavior. That's the name of the course I took. um, and so there's a lot of stuff you got, you learn from practice, and school kind of helps you here and there, but a lot of it, I think, is with personal experience now. um, because I've noticed even at two different places, because I had to take public speaking classes, I think 3 or 4 times. And every single time I've taken it, either the whole class, I'm talking about just other classmates or students, are so antisocial, or they have this fear of public display that they completely shut down and refuse to do any sort of presentations, and they're willing to take the loss on that. Or they pick this random topic, and they don't let the audience familiarize themselves with the topic. Like, for example, I had a guy in one of my classes talk about stocks and bonds and why you should buy Bitcoin, and what's e-currency and all that. But he started talking the whole class like everybody knew what that was, and didn't really hook the audience in at all, and just made it like the whole conversation weird. It's like, um, me picking a random topic of something that nobody, the general public doesn't know, and then talking to them like, they're specialists in that area. So, but every time I've done a public speaking, I always get high grades, because I talk to people like, oh, they're regular, Joe Schmo or whatever you want to call them, and relate to like, hey, I'm talking about this. This is a, this is about this topic. Reason why it has any relevance or its importance, because this can do this, ABC, and then you start kind of reeling them in over time, and then eventually you start learning, like, how long should I be talking? What's too short? What's too long? How do I talk in a way that's not going to bore everybody? Uh, and again, it's just with experience. And of course, when you start off, it's not going to go perfect, but you never know. For me, when I was doing the actual marketing for the car detailing, uh, I had some weird customers here and there, but my first customer was great. We ended up doing 2 jobs with them instead of just one. And then over time, you start learning, who's cheap, who's, wants to build a relationship. And then from there, you have to teach yourself how to grow that relationship with that customer, because those are the people who are going to bring you into consistent money over time, versus it being, a one-time buyer, or, whatever you want to call them. So that's what I find most critical, is that you have to learn public speaking, which most people kind of suck at it.
Mm-hmm.
and there's all kinds of different reasons why people can't suck at it, or it's inexperience, or growing up, you're being introvert, or for me, I had kind of always been like an introvert growing up in elementary, middle school. But by the time I was in high school, I think one of my big motivators was, I didn't really want to go to school at all in elementary school. Middle school was like whatever, but hey, I see these cute girls in class. Let me start talking to them, which evolved into high school being like, all right, I want to get myself a girl, and that kind of was what started opening it up. And then when the girls I want to get with moved away, that kind of had me depressed. And then when I went into actually doing work after high school, that's when you're kind of forced into the front lines, being like, hey, you got to do this job, you got to go talk to people, and that kind of what kick-started everything. Uh, and plus, over time, you start learning cultural differences, like, hey, Americans tend to act this way, talk this way, view things in this way, and then you start seeing, oh, you got people from Europe, they like to do this method of talking and interacting with people versus people from, let's say, Asia or Africa, all kinds of different cultures. And then you start seeing cultural blending, and then you start seeing, oh, wait a second, you know everybody seems to act this way, but Americans seem to do this. And you start kind of your eyes start opening up, and then you realize, oh, okay, so this is how the world kind of seems to work, and kind of grow from there, right? But uh, do you think, or what do you see yourself doing in the future, or do you
What do
have an
I see
idea?
myself in the future? Like, what do you mean?
Well, after you get out of high school, are you going to be going to college, or are you going to be doing work, or do you have a particular plan?
My God, I have no fucking idea
Well, no
what I'm
worries.
gonna do.
Most people I know don't have an idea. The only people I know who have an idea is their parents who have everything set up for them. Like that's when I was in high school. The only people I knew who had a plan of what they were going to do was either the high end rich kids who whose dads and moms are doctors, lawyers, and whoever, or who works at that that high end company. I'm going to make my child follow my path, and basically they have everything set up for them. Uh, the middle group, which most people seem to kind of go to, at least in my area, um, either had a parent who may or may not have, like mine was a little weird. Like my dad technically went and became a PhD in psychology, so you could say went down the whole college route, but then never did a thing with it other than teach some college or teach some classes at the college or community college. Then worked at, like, I think, what did he work for? CMS, or Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, doing something in statistics. Did that for a little bit and then quit, and then moved to Florida, and then tried to. I don't think anything went off from there. While my mom, um, pretty much her background, she went for international business. Got a minor degree in, I think, Spanish and French, but she couldn't find any work with that unless it was like international. Um, and then eventually decided to go into nursing, and then stuck with nursing. So I have mainly my mom's side, who's the main motivator for me to go to college. My dad doesn't really seem to care one way or another, especially now. Uh, so that's why I went to get the business degree, because my mom got a business degree, and I figured that, hey, I can at least do something in entrepreneurship, and if if nothing seems to work, I could possibly do something in like healthcare. But technically, I'm kind of already doing that by being an interpreter who does medical interpreting. But it's for like outpatients, so like physical therapy, like a doctor's visit versus it being like I'm gonna be at the hospital the whole day. Somebody's got like a 10-hour surgery, and I gotta check and see if they have allergies. What medications they're taking. So I have some of that as well. But the people I see who have like the big money coming in my area are either doctors, lawyers. So you basically got what I call the 6 levels, and I got this from like a YouTube video too. Um, you have what's called C-suite jobs. So you're CEO, CFO, CTO, chief financial officer, chief executive officer, chief officer of technology. The top of the top in the company, right? Then you have um, STEM jobs, but STEM jobs seem to be not the very best, but usually among the highest, which STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, uh, usually that. Licensed practitioners, which is basically your doctors, lawyers, um, anything that requires like a license, usually from the state. Um, then you have like your stars, social person, what do you call it? People who are famous, like social influencers, your movie actors, musicians. Um, then you have, let's see, I'm kind of trying to remember everything now. And then I think at the end of the list are like your entrepreneurs. Um, in our city, because my mom worked, and I've worked in high end places like the high end grocery store. One guy who kind of did the same area of what I'm doing, he does. Um, oh God, he said that he does like home cleaning or house cleaning, but he claims that he has 4 teams, and in a week they do over 60. They clean over 60 homes a week, and so that's the first guy I actually met in person, but I never saw his actual like business. Um, the second guy I met who's like a high end person. Um, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I didn't meet. My friend claims that he knows the guy, and the guy is a detailer, but he details for dealerships, and he details with the number 2 dealership in our city. And my friend claims that he makes over $250,000 a year, which I don't know how accurate that is, but I could theorize potentially over 100,000 a year. But I don't know his business details and all that. I have an uncle who opened his own chemistry company, or like he specializes in paints, inks, sealants, stuff to make like your paints and like your graphics on T-shirts and shirts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he makes like the paint and ink and chemicals for that. Um, but he's kind of, I think, going to sort of retire out of that business soon. But I know he's made a few million off of that, but we don't. Uh, but he's kind of like semi-retired. Um, let's see, and I think he never really wanted to massively grow the company. He just wanted to grow it to a point where he can kind of support himself financially or be financially independent. Um, I know one doctor who's like the head of dermatology of the whole Charlotte area. Um, she owns like a big house and she owns like several horses and kind of has a small farm. Um, but she, on top of being like a dermatologist, she also does like research as well in our city. So that's pretty high end, but that's like a licensed job plus being on top of being a licensed person, you're kind of going out and trying to make scientific research and developing what do you call it, new science basically. Um, and there's all kinds of people. Like I met I met a guy who's like the top plumber company in the whole Charlotte. Um,
Well, working as a plumber, no.
who? But I met him at the airport when I was working at the airport too, and I kind of wish I had a little bit more time to talk to him. But he was trying to basically open up the same company that was in Charlotte. He wanted to try to open it up in Russia, and this was like way before COVID and the whole Russia Ukraine stuff. Um, and I was down to help him too because like I have a uncle who's an engineer, um, who would have been able to help. Plus, he knows like he has a little bit of contacts. Um, what's it called? Not in government, but like kind of what do you call it? Government offices, I guess is a better way to call it. But it's like on a city level. But he would have been helpful with that. Considering that his one of his sons is selling what do you call it, machine parts, which probably would have been useful in that. Um, but again, when everything comes at you fast, sometimes you don't think straight. Um, Otherwise, do you have any dream jobs that you would have want to try to see what it's like?
Being a porn star.
Well, you're gonna have to get tested every day to make sure you have no STDs.
Oh yes.
Yeah, they're gonna probably check you, and then they gotta clean you up, give you enemas. Uh, oh God, they're probably gonna do blood work on you every single day. You gotta be physically fit, and plus, it's only a limited amount of time. It won't be. It's very unlikely that you would be a long-term person. Plus, I heard it's competitive. Everybody's trying to be on top of each other in terms of popularity. And I don't even know the details of it because it's like a fantasy job too. And I think you're supposed to be in what they call um, what's the word? Not Hollywood areas, but you have to be in like areas where um, media is present, like L.A., Miami, Florida, New York. Those high-end areas, and plus you probably gotta be like a nobody and be lucky. I, but I don't know the details at all. It's a lot of research in that, but plus the negative connotation that can be associated with that. Are your parents going to be approving of that? What's going to happen 20 years down the line, being like, "Hey, I know you from that, from that, from that movie or whatever." Oh,